Iran, Israel and the US, the war, the human cost, and what the world is facing now. This is no longer just another Middle East flare-up. What began as a direct US-Israeli war on Iran has now spread across the region, with a fragile ceasefire already under strain, hundreds more killed in Lebanon, global oil routes disrupted, and rising fear that the worst may still be ahead. As of April 9, 2026, the biggest headline is this: the United States and Iran have entered a tentative 2-week ceasefire, but the region is still burning. Israel says the ceasefire does not apply to its war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran and some mediators say Lebanon should be included. That disagreement is now one of the biggest reasons this ceasefire could fail. How the war reached this point, according to Reuters and AP, this phase of the conflict began in late February 2026, when US and Israeli forces struck Iran. The conflict widened after the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a joint US-Israeli strike, which triggered a broader regional response, including Hezbollah entering the fight on Iran's side. Since then, the war has expanded beyond Iran itself. It now involves direct US-Iran fighting, Israeli military operations, Hezbollah attacks from Lebanon, and dangerous knock-on effects across shipping lanes, diplomacy, and energy markets. The human cost in Iran, the clearest official death toll from inside Iran now, comes from Iran's forensic authorities, who say more than 3,000 people have been killed across Iran since the war began on February 28. Reuters also reported that around 40% of the dead required forensic identification, a sign of how severe and destructive many of the attacks have been. That number is one of the most important in this story because it shows the scale of destruction on Iranian soil. And it does not fully capture the fear, displacement, trauma, blackouts and family separation that have spread across Iranian society and among Iranians abroad. AP reported that many Iranian Americans are struggling to contact relatives because of communication disruptions and are deeply anxious about what may happen next. The human cost in Lebanon and around Israel. Even though the US-Iran ceasefire was announced, Lebanon has become one of the bloodiest fronts. AP reported that on April 9, Lebanon was dealing with the aftermath of Israeli strikes that killed more than 300 people and wounded about 1,150 in what AP described as the deadliest day in the renewed conflict. Reuters separately reported more than 250 killed in the previous wave of bombardment. AP and Reuters also report that more than 1 million people have been displaced in Lebanon and that hospitals may soon run out of critical medical supplies because mass casualty demand has been overwhelming. The WHO warning reported by Reuters said Lebanon's hospitals could run short of trauma supplies within days. On the Israeli side of the Lebanon front, AP reported that Israeli casualties include 12 soldiers and a few civilians in the current Hezbollah war. Hezbollah has continued missile and drone attacks into Israel, keeping northern areas under threat even while diplomatic talks are being discussed. The human cost for the United States has also paid a direct price. The Wall Street Journal reported that 13 American service members have been killed and 381 wounded after roughly 40 days of war. Reuters also reported the loss of a US fighter jet over Iran and a search operation for a missing crew member, underlining that this has become a real shooting war for American forces, not just a remote air campaign. For US audiences, that matters because this war is no longer something happening far away without consequence. It has already cost American lives, and every new escalation increases the risk of a deeper military commitment. Do Americans support the war? The latest Reuters/Ipsos polling suggests the answer is largely no. Reuters reported that most Americans have a bleak view of the war, that more than 75% oppose sending ground troops to Iran, and that many expect the conflict to worsen life in Iran, destabilize the Middle East further, and hurt Americans through higher energy costs. Reuters also reported that about 2/3 of Americans want a quick end to US involvement. So if your audience is in the United States, one important line is this: most Americans do not appear to want a long war with Iran, and they are especially against sending US ground troops. What about Israel's public mood? Reuters reports that public skepticism in Israel is high when it comes to peace prospects, and that many civilians expect continued conflict rather than a stable diplomatic breakthrough. That does not mean every Israeli supports more war, but it does mean the public mood appears shaped by insecurity, long-term conflict, and low confidence in quick peace deals. Why the ceasefire is so fragile? The ceasefire between the US and Iran is not a full peace deal. Reuters, AP, and other reporting all point to a core dispute, whether Lebanon is part of the ceasefire. Iran and some mediators say it should be. Israel and the US say it is not. As long as Israel continues major strikes on Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran can argue that the ceasefire is being violated in spirit, if not in wording. That is why negotiations in Islamabad matter so much. Reuters and AP report that Iranian and US delegations are heading into talks, but the airstrikes in Lebanon are already making those talks harder. Iran's president has said the strikes make negotiations meaningless. The global impact this war is not only about missiles and airstrikes, it is also about the global economy. Reuters, AP, and the Washington Post all point to the Strait of Hormuz as a major danger point. Iran has disrupted shipping there, and that waterway is one of the world's most important routes for oil and energy transport. The economic consequences are already being felt. Reuters/Ipsos polling found Americans worried about financial pain and higher fuel prices. The Washington Post reported that a prolonged disruption could push oil dramatically higher and raise the risk of wider inflation and even recession. In simple terms, this war can hit ordinary people far beyond the Middle East through gasoline, food, shipping, manufacturing, and energy costs. Right now, the region is balanced between diplomacy and a much larger disaster. Iran has suffered more than 3,000 deaths, Lebanon has suffered hundreds killed in the latest strikes and over 1 million displaced. Israel remains under threat from Hezbollah attacks. The United States has already lost 13 service members and hundreds more have been wounded. And across the world, markets, governments, and ordinary families are watching nervously to see whether this fragile ceasefire survives even a few more days. This is no longer just a regional conflict. It is a war with global consequences, a humanitarian crisis still unfolding, and a test of whether diplomacy can move faster than destruction.